some of like the most ferocious fighters against
Now we're
the
live.
Nazis in World War II.
I don't think
So-
I'm talking about the same person.
Yeah, let's go. We got this, Shale.
All right.
And just add Craig.
Maybe was it you, Joshua, who was invited to New Zealand? Who was the other guy?
It was me. I didn't get to go.
Oh yeah, it was you. Okay, my bad.
Now recording.
Welcome to the Yanggang Roundtable. It's Saturday, November 28th, 2025, 21 p.m. Eastern. I got Avory Wyatt here. Welcome to the show. We are a basic income advocacy podcast, and it's good to have you. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me today. So my name is Avory Wyatt. I'm Washoe and Paiute. So basically, I like to tell people this. So our like American names or like our colonized names are the Washoe and Paiute.
Mm-hmm.
But like our real like names like for us is the Numu and the Washoe. So I'm Washoe Numu. I'm 24. I'm a college student. I've been in school for like 6 years, so I have a lot of experience with like the educational system and just like politics in general. But I guess that's why I've been in school for 6 years, is because I do so much other stuff on the side. So, but I'm studying public health and political science with a minor in addiction treatment services. I do a lot of activism in Reno, and also I try and just do it a lot on my social media, because I feel like that's really where activism in stage is today, is on social media. So I try and keep my social media up with activism for all Native stuff, just honestly to help all people who are in need around the world. So yeah, that's a little bit of my intro.
I can't wait to hear more.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So
Let's go.
I would love to hear more about like what you and Josh have done together.
Oh, so yeah, like we said right before we got here, me and Josh have been on the front lines together, whether it's against what's his name, Charlie Kirk. We had some crazy Christian people that we were up against. What else? Yeah, we've been like head to head with administrations.
God, it's
Yeah,
funny you mentioned that.
Mhm.
I kind of used to come from that side until I was kind of like, you know what, like they really don't care about like whether I'm happy or not happy. It's kind of interesting because I kind of said to myself that when there's no work to do and you're blaming kind of like the person for it, like that's not right. So I kind of like slipped away from that kind of mind, those kind of people. Like Yang got me to see kind of like the holes in their logic and their way of doing things. So I'll put that in there.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think at one point I was ignorant too. Like I always admit to my ignorance back in the day. Like I admit to like racism. Like we as Native people, we grew up in communities and we're taught by white people to learn and think certain ways, and so we think those ways, and that's why we tend to like have like racists in our communities, and we tend to have like right-wing
Can you
ideals.
give me an example?
Yeah. So let me think. There's a lot. So I know there's a lot of anti-blackness in the Native community because we're often, and that it's also interesting when you talk about colorism in the Native community, because it's not good to be white. Like this isn't what I think now, but it's not good to be white, and it's not good to be like a dark-skinned Native.
So you want to just toe the line.
And I think
Shoot for the middle.
Do people
like
speak
very
Spanish
middle.
to you all the time?
what was that?
Do people speak Spanish to you all the time?
Yeah. It's really it's funny, and like that's another thing too that we can talk about is just like Spanish language. But yeah, the example was, yeah, I think that anti-blackness just kind of comes from we were forced into boarding schools. We were taught Christianity. We were taught basically to be European. We were taught to be Christian Europeans, and so we amplified like their views, and they became ours. And luckily, a lot of us are breaking down those views nowadays, and like that's the work I do in my community. I like work with my parents. I work with close family. We just talk about issues like this that normally we wouldn't. So, but yeah, when it comes to the Spanish part too, it's interesting because it's almost like, because we have a lot of indigenous people. Like I don't really look at just like Native Americans as like the one like native people. Like we have indigenous people everywhere, and it's almost like we're all one because we have all the same shared experiences with like the colonized state. So New Zealand, Mexico, so Spain, Canada, France, like United States, like all it's all like these European countries. So we all have the same shared experiences. But a lot of people don't even know like that Spanish is not even a European language anyway. And so when people speak Spanish to me, I'm just like I don't really care. It's just like someone speaking English.
Is it because we had the experience between the East and the West Coast natives, right? Totally different, right?
Yeah. Let me
The
talk a little bit
Spanish
about
thing,
that.
Avery, right? Is that it was safer to be able to like hide your Native Americanness and like speak Spanish. It'd be safer to do that than actually be a Native American because we were getting genocided. So you would almost like shun your heritage just for survival, right?
Yeah, and that's what people do today, and that's what you see, because like they're taught by this media, like, oh, look at the natives, they show us we're like mascots, we're dehumanized across the media, and so what does that make people do? And so it makes them attached to those dehumanizing things, and it makes them amplify stuff that is sort of erasing us in a way. And so with like I know like natives like with the Redskins team, and so even though like not many people know like the Redskin is essentially the scalp native. So like we natives didn't scalp people. Natives were the people who were scalped. And so when our skin was red, that they would refer to us as the redskin. And so people would attach themselves to this name just because like we're searching for any type of visibility in the media or anything. And so they would say like, oh, like man, like I'm against like the changing the name just because like that's us, but it's like they don't realize like what it actually means.
There's a lot of attachment to the origin with this fake media, if you will, and it really has this what do you call it? Not necessarily a projection, but maybe that is the word I'm thinking of. But like people have all these assumptions and attachments, right? And it's not very healthy. It's just kind of like looking at what is it? The Confederate flag maybe is something I'm trying to think about, where like there's these origins that aren't something we should be celebrating necessarily, and dismisses like anybody it affects, because people don't recognize there's cross association, if you will,
So were these conservative like Charlie Kirk guys trying to like recruit Native Americans into their cause or something like that? Like
No, they were just so like it was like a whole like day thing. Like they were planning throughout the week. And so we planned posters on campus because we had like straight up, I don't know if you know a little bit about UNR, but we had a student, he was at the Charlottesville protest. He's the poster child for Charlottesville, and he went to our school. And so he came back to school. The university's like protecting him with police everywhere he goes, even though he's like done all this hateful stuff. And so that's where it all kind of started. That's where it really started going downhill with like them protecting like so the problem is that it was that they would protect them, but when it came to like natives and black students and gay students and just anybody seeking help from the university, they would condemn us. So they were allowing to condemn us, and that was the problem that we had. And so we were the ones who had to like really like fight to say like, hey, this is not the stuff that. So the university has like a mission statement, and so we were like, hey, this is against the mission statement. How can you allow their voices to be heard and not want our voices to be heard? And so
right.
with the native stuff, I think we went to like he had like a speech full of people, and there was like actually like some straight up like Nazis and white nationalists who showed up.
Yeah.
Like they were like they weren't even like blatant, they weren't even trying to hide like their racism and stuff like that. So
Just kind of like ridiculous because like Trump's stepson is a Jew, and you have like Nazis and white supremacists there. It just doesn't make any doesn't add up.
We actually partnered with I think it's called Hillel, because they were the ones who really, because they're like, this guy is against Jewish people, like stuff he says isn't really benefiting them. So we partnered.
No, Hillel, not halal. Hillel.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean, racial hypocrisy is just, it goes all the way to Hitler himself, who was Jewish. So
I don't think that.
even though
part
he
is
was
true,
he was
go ahead.
like, all right, yeah.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Avery.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, but
okay.
me and Josh, we just protested him being there. There was a lot of stuff that went down that day. Then the Christian people, we had some Christians that were just spewing like real Bible stuff. Like I like to say real Bible because like to us, like we were taught to like follow this book that we don't really think is true, goes against all of our ways and our beliefs.
Right.
But so they were just spewing straight up like all this stuff that was out of the Bible. They were calling girls like if someone was wearing too tight of pants, they would call them out. Like it was crazy. They're calling everyone like virgins and.
But I mean, what's really stupid is like there's separation of church and state. So I mean, already you gotta like you gotta not bring that stuff into this kind of thing. Like no one like has to be forced to like be under any kind of religion, and yet they're doing like BS like this. So it's kind of ironic, and it's also kind of ironic that I mean. Jesus was himself a Jew, so got like white supremacists against thing. It's I don't know if you know, like it's cognitive dissonance. It's very strange.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
that's really what it is.
Our relationships to our like it's tricky. I don't get the right wording, but like our ethnic backgrounds, our cultures of origins, our ancestry is so strange in the United States. So many of us are, rather than like looking at the real histories of our families and like what the realities of their lives were, are like imitating movies for like our own ethnicities,
Oh, yeah.
And like
I
look at these
hate
bizarre
that,
ideas.
I think you're very right. And if we misrepresent cultures within movies because we didn't let them portray their own culture, I think a lot of our memory is encoded with that, and we just assume that's correct. We assume they did all the due diligence to make sure it was accurately represented, but the reality is it's not, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't even take the time to really do it.
Right.
Exactly.
And,
exactly. Like there's a term like Chris, he's not on today, but he's been on before. He says that people like to LARP their ethnicities. I just love that turn of phrase. LARP is live action role playing. It's like you're playing a character. It's like you're born and someone's like, "Hey, I mean, like I'll do me because it's safe. I'm half Irish, so if I walk around doing Irish stereotype stuff, if I go like, it's St. Patrick's Day, I'm getting irresponsibly drunk. Yeah, it's me. It's my heritage, right? That's okay, but that has nothing to do with Ireland." Nothing to do with my actual ancestors. Nothing. It's stupid. It's a LARP. I'm role playing if I do that. But it's acceptable. It's not just acceptable. It's celebrated. MSNBC, CNN, Fox, anybody, all the major news from all across the spectrum will have no problem. Like St. Patrick's Day. I
mean, the dumb thing is that like poor white people, I think, share in common more with like all of these kind of like people who are oppressed than they actually do with like a lot of the landowning class and a lot of the people who like own all the corporations. So it's like why would you get brainwashed by like people who say like, yeah, you're better than like, I don't know, like a Jew or like an indigenous, when it's like, yeah, but you don't own any land and you hardly have any money. So like why would you join up with these people who are keeping you in that position? It's not the indigenous person or the Jewish person. Their whole capitalistic system is keeping you, and maybe in a job that you hate that can fire you tomorrow and you'll have nothing, and yet like it's pretty ridiculous.
Welcome,
It's funny that you bring.
Welcome.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Avery. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, it's funny that you bring up the whole LARPing situation because like for natives right now, that's tough. And I know even Josh could probably touch on this, but like everywhere we go, there's always like this one like white like native person. Like of course they're not native, but they're like, oh, my grandma's like a Cherokee or like something like that. Like, and we know it's not true. Like we've heard it once a week that someone's grandma's Cherokee. It's like how many freaking Cherokee grandmas are out there?
The four C's, Avery.
The white native, as I've been told by my other friend who's native, right? But it
Yeah.
took me until this last year to actually sit down and even watch a YouTube video that was educational about my Chippewa Native heritage, right? Like I literally didn't know my own heritage. And I also talked to the if you will white side of my family, right? And I know their histories and stuff, but the Native American side of my tribe, my dad's side essentially, I don't know enough. But what's interesting is even when I wanted to learn more about even registering as a native with my tribe, they're like, well, you're if you're less than 1/4 blood, it's almost pointless because there's no benefits and blah blah blah, and that was a bit disheartening because they were pretty much like, good luck, but try BIA, maybe they will, help you out, right? Which is Bureau of Indian Affairs.
What do you guys think of the whole Elizabeth Warren thing?
Oh hell no.
Oh man. Don't even go there.
I don't
man.
need an
Don't
extra
even
reason
go
to
there.
dislike her, but she's just awful, and she's not the kind of person society should reward with power and riches. That's
true.
I would like to know something that happened to me and Josh is that we actually it was during the campaign, and we had like an Elizabeth Warren person try to bring another Native person to come speak to us, but they were just going to talk about Elizabeth Warren. So we're like, I think that was like one of our big things too, is that we turned down popular. Her name's Deb Haaland, and she's like one of the few Native Congress people. We turned her down because we're like, we're not going to deal with like some
Fall for
like
this, right?
making us look bad. Like
100%.
this person doesn't have the real Native experience that we do. This person doesn't have anything close to like I literally worry about losing my language. I worry about my bloodline in the future. I worry about people I date. Like this person doesn't even have to worry about that kind of stuff. And then
That's the one thing that they don't like. People don't realize, like, from like in a higher educational standpoint, like the stuff that like me and Avery have to take on, like just as like a regular student or researcher or whatever, is like tenfold of what like a normal like college student would have to take on. Like we're recruiting. What was it, Mom?
And one of I think his excuse for that whole thing was that it's just everyone in the Midwest does it. I think was his excuse to saying for Warren as far as trying to claim heritage. And I don't know, it wasn't very convincing, but
yeah, no, it's so
Is it just me? Or?
yeah, I've seen natives across the U.S. and so it is kind of weird because out here, like I said, like white people only got here in the mid 1800s, like where I'm at. And so when you look at natives on like the East Coast, they were getting there like in the 1500s, 1600s, and stuff like that. So for some of us, we're like 200 years behind or ahead of other tribes. And so when you look at, I've seen natives that are straight up like know their language and stuff, and they look white. And I think that's so weird to us because we like over here we're all like brown, like we all look like a stereotypical like native person. So, but like when you go to the East Coast, you see a lot of black natives because natives actually back in the day they would take in slaves, like people who like ran away, and so they would help them out, and then they in turn they became native too. So, yeah, there's a lot of black natives in the South. Midwest, yeah, that's where you do see a lot of like white natives though.
So it's like runs the gamut.
So,
Yeah.
what would you guys like to see the Americans that want to work with tribes? What kind of like relations would you like to see?
So what I would like to see is just them. They just need to listen. Like they need to know that their policies are not our policies. Their structures of government are not our structures of government. I think they need to really just listen to us and listen to how we do things. I mean, like, it's so funny because a lot of stuff that happens in the United States today, like they're like, oh man, climate change is going to hurt us, like this stuff. But they have been saying that since the beginning of time, since white people first got here. And then now they're really pushing that stuff. And then usually it happens with tons of stuff. They're like, oh, this and this is happening. But all the natives knew that a long time ago. But yeah, well, I guess we'll hop on there.
I don't even think like the U.S. is even like a good country to emulate, even for like white people. I mean, look, like if you look at like European countries, I think like they're like Native American kind of nations, because it's like they at least have some kind of health care, some kind of like help when people like fall on rough times. So if anything, I think like the Indian tribes are like doing it and Indian tribes kind of like had a UBI, like what Josh talks about. Like if you are a native, like all the money the casino gets, like some of it goes to like Native Americans. Some of them like send you a monthly or yearly check. And I think that's like way better than this like hyper capitalist bullshit that we have. And if you like in Europe, like they have more support for like their people than like the average US citizen has from their like government. So it's like, yeah.
What is the politically correct way, or what is offensive when talking about natives, and what is preferred? Because I feel like we're entering a stage where we want to be a little more mindful, right? In general, it's not quite there, but I mean, I remember my ex-husband, who was like 95% Yakima Native, like he was very adamant about using the word native and not so much Indian. And so I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. So I guess like that makes sense. So for like native people like myself, like we call each other like Indians. Like that's like our slang for each other. Like that's really the only language. That's really the only time I ever hear people call each other Indians is like between us. Like we could call each other like Indians and like natives. But like I prefer native. Like whenever anybody asks me, but when I really think about it, like all these terms are European anyway. So if it's not my actual tribe, like I'm Washoe or like oh you're Washoe or you're Numu, honestly it's not as bad as it used to be when it came to me being picky about it. But I really prefer indigenous and native just because indigenous really spans all of us. Like it gets rid of the whole border aspect that we were really separated by, and it kind of brings us together because we all have one shared experience. But when it comes to like from here, like if I'm just talking about natives from here, I just say native.
I agree with Avery on that. Like the being called like Indian is like the worst thing you could do. I hate that. I hate being called Indian.
That's why I don't like Indian is because like people use that as a derogatory term. It's like that's the only time I've ever heard it. Is like they're like, oh, you Indian or something like that, or you.
Yeah.
You don't say, oh, you native.
I agree with Avery though. Like when you talk about like he likes being called Washoe. That's what tribe he's from. I like being called from my tribe too. So like I like from Oneida. So I'm from Oneida Nation. So it's like I like being called that. But like native and indigenous are definitely the way to go.
Okay.
Well, yeah,
because
and I wanted
Indians
to say that so
already for people of India.
Yeah.
Right. Because Columbus like confused it. I remember when my dad said like, "Oh, feather Indian or ruby Indians?" Like, that's not cool. It's just native. Yeah.
It gets even more confusing if you're talking about the Caribbean.
Because Columbus actually thought this was India when he came here. He just like, how could you mess the map up?
Moto, what did you say?
Yeah.
Oh, it just gets more confusing if you like include the Caribbean in that because people there like to be called West Indians. So there's like
yeah. There's a lot of like I know like in Australia and Canada it can be like Aboriginal. We don't really use that here, but they have different names for all kinds of people. But honestly, yeah, they're all European names anyway. So what makes them any different if it's not like our actual people's name?
They don't call them like European American.
The thing, I was gonna say something, but
Are you good?
I mean, also just in terms of the way we
so like what like Avery did you look into like what Yang is doing and like if that's like more of like kind of like the UBI idea that Yang has is like Indians have already kind of had that.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think like when it comes to that, like we don't really like when it comes to my people. Like I've learned all this knowledge from like my elders and like especially like indigenous women. But basically, like when it comes to like wealth and stuff like that, like we don't believe in wealth. We don't believe in having any other. Like we don't believe in making yourself better than the other person. So like our view is always collective, and so that's why when it comes to that stuff, like when it comes to distributing money back to people, it's for them, and it's not really to benefit like an economy or anything like that, or like it's not meant to like make them more than the person. It's just meant to make them survive. So Just like how all of us are collectively surviving, it's meant for us to survive.
It's interesting.
Others.
It's interesting how you have a framework that uses the economy as an alternative to the people, because it really kind of hits the nail on the head for what the reality of the situation is right now in America. But defenders of the economic model we have and use would say, oh no, the economy is the people. It represents the real interactions of meaningful value between people, and it does not at all in the way we currently conceive of the economy.
Right.
Yeah, it's an abstraction.
Well, without the people, you have no economy.
It's a casino for bankers and a graph of rich people's feelings.
Well, economic.
Right,
well, that's now
just like
the stock market. Yeah, the economy.
But yeah, there's
I want to
like
hear what Moto's saying. Yeah.
there's I mean, ideally the economy. Oh, can you not hear me? Am I faint?
I can hear you. You are a little faint, but go ahead and go.
All right. No, I was just saying it's meant to be a way of distributing resources. That's really what an economy means. And the idea is supposed to be that the economy ultimately serves people, but it kind of ends up being a bit of a golden calf, a bit of a god in itself that mostly ends up just being about self-perpetuation. And I think that essentially gets lost when we talk about the economy, in that we take it for granted that it's supposed to be serving people, and it often is not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like almost like if you look at right now, like we could all be suffering, but as long as rich people got their money, the stock market's going to be up. So
I wanted to backtrack for a minute too about like even just like what we call indigenous people here, and I think the fact that we don't know what to call you is a fact that just betrays how little dialogue that we actually engage in, and how much we like.
It's because we're still, we were under the BIA.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago. That was actually the Department of War. Like we were considered like war of the state.
Yeah, I mean, like
the government literally, like they literally.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't
policy.
No, sorry.
Written down policies with like eugenics. So eugenics, like blood quantum. So what blood quantum is that I can't be a registered native. Like I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. Oh, like what they said. Like I can't be a registered native if I don't have 1/4 of blood. And so what blood quantum is that they try to phase out natives by enforcing that, saying you're not a native person if you don't have a certain amount of native blood. And so they force that. And then when people first got here, they have all these written down documents of strategies that they use to erase the native. And so the first one was institute a form of punishment in tribes. And so because we didn't have that, we weren't violent people, we weren't hateful people, we worked as a collective, so we didn't hurt our people. And so they instituted punishment, they instituted leaders, which we also did not have, which is also a false thing that a lot of people tend to believe with this whole chiefs thing. Like we never really had single leaders. And they also put us in boarding schools, and then they made women insubordinate. Because back in the day, like I read documents where they said like, oh, the natives were treating their women like slaves, but no, like we all worked as a collective. Those women honestly had bigger roles in households than men did, and they had bigger roles in families than men did. So that's why we really do see women as the most powerful figure in our communities, is because that's where our knowledge is held. That's what creates life. And yeah, I think these people really did kind of purposely erase us.
I got here a little late. You said you
were. See, that's the thing too. Is like we come from, like, I came from a matriarchy, so like we actually did have the Iroquois did have chiefs, but the thing is like the clan leaders. Well, this is kind of interesting between the U.S. government and like the negotiations with our people. The clan mothers were like the leaders of our tribe, so when they went to negotiate with our people, they actually went to the chiefs. But the chiefs didn't have any say in what we were actually going to do, and the clan mothers were like the ones that ran everything. So like
the chief,
so they actually negotiated with the people who weren't even leading. They didn't want to like recognize women as like leaders of our people, first off, and they were negotiating with the chiefs, which had no say on what what our nation was actually going to do with like what we had. So it's kind of interesting how that even took place. But anyways, besides the point, that we hold women in very high regard as leaderships in our communities. They're pillars of our community.
Also, but like even in the sense of like your two nations are different. It's like comparing like Spain and Russia, but we just sort of instinctually kind of collapse distinctions, and I think that's like a big issue now with just how we break people up and whatnot. That we kind of destroy people's diversity, their individuality, their ideologies, their cultures, and there should be room to make the distinction and how those distinctions interact with each other.
But if you actually think about it, man, we're like almost the direct opposite of what the American ideology wants to be, right? Individualism, no, we'd rather be a collective, man, right? Like we're doing things at a community level. Like it's just a total different mindset compared to what the American, the general American people are like. So it's
not
it's
to mention
oh sorry.
that that the Americans were kind of like the rejects of Europe, and nobody ever kind of talks about that because they wanted to build like a theocracy, and the other Europeans were like, no, we don't want a theocracy here, and they're like, oh, we'll just go somewhere else and like where we're not oppressed and build our theocracy. And it's like, oh, we found this place. Wait a minute, there are already people here. Well, whatever, you're part of our theocracy. Even though we talk about like individualism and freedom and like leave people alone, we're not leaving you alone. It's like.
Although there were kind of different strains of colonization too. You have both like the very corporate style, and then you have like the very religious, and they kind of mingle.
Right. Like, yeah, they kind of, but like fascism is like a mix of the corporate sector and the government sector. And I think we kind of saw that in 2008. I mean, it's kind of sad. Like when individuals are like hurting, the government doesn't step up and help them. But like when large, multi-billion-dollar, companies are, it's like, oh, we all have to help them. But like this is collectivism helping the person who's causing the problem and the person who's using up the resources. It's like the losses are socialized, but the gains are privatized, and you just got the worst of both worlds when you're talking about that.
And that kind of brings up too, like with presidents, like natives have never, like I always love this quote. It says like we've never, like it says, I hate all American presidents because we've never had a good president in our books. Even with Obama, with like his so-called, like everyone sort of paints him like as this sort of great figure who like really helped the people, like for us, but he still just maintained the same stuff that the country's been doing to natives since the beginning of time. And so like with like oil, like he had like some of the highest oil percentages in the history of the United States. This was so like fixed on this oil industry and the military, and that messed with natives. Like when we were at Standing Rock, they asked Obama to like shut this pipeline down, but he didn't for months. And then just in time for the election.
I wonder if a Yang presidency would have been.
What's particularly pernicious about the political climate that we've just entered pretty recently is that if someone were to say, no, like what you said, no, Obama is doing the same neoliberal oppressive stuff that isn't so different from fascism that every American president has been doing, and he shouldn't be celebrated as like a progressive hero, then suddenly people can like, say, well, that's because you're a racist, So we're in a bad place dialectically as a culture.
Yeah. I think when it comes to that point too, you just gotta you just gotta show them the history. Like what's it, liberation, representation is a liberation. So even if I have my own person in there, like if I had a native person in the office who was doing the same stuff, I wouldn't support them either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like some people can get other people from the same place to like sell those people out. It's like betray your people and we'll give you prestige and money and like all this stuff. And even the black people said we're sick and tired of faces in high places. It would be the same for you guys. They just get a Native American, they give them all this money and all this prestige, and it's like, oh, like do this stuff that kind of like hurts your people, and they'll be like, well, if there's enough zeros at the end of the check, then it's like, okay.
It's just another form of panderous tokenism. Just just different versions of that nonstop.
It's a little even more.
I think it's a little different though. Like you're talking about like governmental officials up in higher places and whatnot. But
Yeah.
I think my opinion is this: is that this is my opinion. This isn't everyone's opinion. Is, you know, and this is going to sound a little bit off the wall. Is like we're definitely fighting for our sovereignty, and we have land, and we got a stake, and we want our territory back. It's not about being a part of the U.S. government, man. Like, in all honesty, if we could be like rip ourselves away from the U.S. government, I think that is something viable we would probably actually do.
That position is non-normative, but it's not unreasonable.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is like I don't think it's ever going to happen. Of course, it's not going to happen. But like that's what we're actually all fighting for is our sovereignty. Like we want our place to like govern ourselves. Like we didn't make treaties with the United States. Like an individual doesn't make a treaty with another government. A government makes a treaty with another government, and that's what we are. We are our own nations, and I think people like forget about that. And like I almost cringe when we actually see Native Americans in the Senate because I'm like, man, like, what government are you actually serving? Are you serving like the Native American government, or are you serving the U.S. government? Like, I don't know, like how to. And that's kind of an odd.
You nailed it.
Position that I'm in.
Like, just because someone looks a certain way doesn't mean they're serving people that look like them or people that come from any part of their background. You know.
Which I think, you know, any white person could tell you that too. Like, we have. Did that ever work? Really, like, you know. I think we have to understand it's worse than even tokenism. The idea is to essentially insulate the upper class and the ruling classes from criticism and from any kind of like common like lower class uprising or alliance by saying, look, we're diverse, we represent you. And that's never really been the case, but you know, that's what they're going for. And that's unfortunately, that's the main driving goal of diversity. Not that diversity is bad. I think, you know, it's good for anybody to be able to.
Well, I think that's why we saw the rise of Trump. I think a lot of people were like tired of like, oh, you just want like a better life for yourself because you're a racist and you're xenophobic and you're sexist, and they were like, no. Like if like your job has gone away and your source of income has gone away, like wanting a better life for yourself isn't xenophobic, racist, and all of that stuff. But the Democrats, since they didn't really have a message to like you know, tailor to those people, they just said like, oh, I don't know, it's better if we're all diverse and if we're all multicultural. But if we're all diverse and multicultural, but everyone is suffering and only a few people at the top like have everything, it doesn't really mean much. Then you just get like a few ethnic groups. You take like a couple of people from those ethnic groups and you make them rich and you make them part of this neoliberal machine. But then you say, oh, that's fine because, oh, look, they're from this different ethnic group. Screw that. They did with Kamala. They just said like, oh, she's so diverse, but she's been putting her own people in jail. So what?
The truth is, they're not her people.
Not her people. Yeah.
She doesn't view them really that way. Her people are the people she's governing with, and that's
right.
You know,
right. Yeah. Exactly. These black faces in high places, they're not like the friend of the average, you know, person that from their ethnic group. They're friends with the machine that's oppressing the people in their ethnic groups, but it's all just window dressing. All it is, you know. So people are kind of saying like we're tired of the window dressing, like we want substance, and I think that's really what I saw in Yang.
The question actually becomes though, like, how do we transition to a future where these are discussions long in the past and we've actually moved towards a better future? Like, what is the end goal? Like, what is the vision we have here?
I think it depends for a lot of people, honestly. I could say, like, for me, like, it can be like the reestablish the indigenous ways. Like, this is indigenous land. It's native land. I think that they need to establish the ways of the people that were here before them. And I think that's really my only outlook on it. I'm not sure, Josh, if you have a different outlook on what you would like the future to look like.
What I want to see is actually have representation at the UN. I want to have to reclaim all our land back eventually. I know it's a tall order to ask for, but reclaim all our land back and just have like our own little place, man. This is like our own. I want our own government, our own nation, and do things the way that we're supposed to be doing. So it's kind of what I want. It's gonna be difficult, but hopefully we can get there.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people will tell you too. Like that's their job is to maintain the Constitution. It's their job to maintain this government. And so they'll tell you, "Oh, that's impossible." They'll tell you, "Oh, you can't do that. That's impossible." But it is possible. I think that our native governments really show it. And I think it's like I said earlier, like a lot of this stuff that we've already been talking about for hundreds of years. And then when it comes into actual reality and then it's too late to fix it, I think it just shows that Native people really have this knowledge. And one story I really like to share is so there's Native people from Sacramento near here, about an hour away, and they fled the area. This is like in the 1860s, so there was actually white people there at the time, but they fled the area, and the white people were like, "Oh, what's going on?" They didn't know what was happening, and then about a week later, a huge like flood hit the area, and like everyone's houses flooded out. The streets were flooded with like a foot of water. And then at that point, they were like, "Oh, maybe we should have listened to the natives because they knew something that we didn't. They left a week ago." And so I think this really reflects into the government. I think they just really need to listen to Native people, and they need to reestablish the ways. They need to give the land back. And I know that's one huge movement that I've been pushing on right now too, is the land back movement. And yeah, they need, honestly, like it's a lot, but like it takes, just like how we've learned right now to get to where you are today. I think it's easy to learn like from us now. Like take away the American system of learning and start listening from Native people.
I'm kind of like curious from perspective. Obviously, we're not in the position to broker treaties on behalf of the U.S. government or anything like that. But what I guess what would you see ideally the vehicle for land reclamation looking like? What would I guess your sort of ideal?
Well, I can tell. I want Avery to go on this, and I'll tell you what we're actually doing model afterwards. But Avery.
Oh, you can go first, Josh. I'll let you go.
Oh, what we're doing is actually we're just buying it back. Like we're just straight up just economically buying it back. Like we're slowly just turning it out. I think
it's the American way.
Yeah, so we're just economically buying it back. So we have a strong economy up here in Oneida. So I'd say I think we've gained between 30 and 40,000 acres of our original land. Not original land, but our reservational land. We'll say that. In Wisconsin, it was checkerboard at one point. We were down to 50 acres, and now we're like 40 or 50,000 acres. Somewhere 30 or 40,000. My bad, 30 or 40,000. We do own a little bit of land in New York, but as for getting it all back, that'll be a difficult task because I don't think we're getting 500 million acres in New York anytime soon.
Do you, as far as asserting, are you able, like, of the land you buy back, are you able to assert like full sovereignty over it, or is that like kind of like a gray area?
So what the BIA does, actually, they slow up the land trust process. So like we'll still get taxed on it for like 4 or 5 years down the line, and then they'll slowly transition that into the reservational land. So it's kind of a pain in the ass. The BIA system is extremely slow, and I think it's meant to be slow. I think it's meant to keep natives as pressed as long as they can. So this is my opinion. Maybe Avery can expand on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Of course, like I don't like the idea of like having to buy back land, just because I think it's super wrong for Native people to have to pay for land that's already theirs. And I think honestly, like I'm more radical. Like I would just like to just take it back by force, honestly. But I guess like in a perfect society, it would be first to follow the treaties that they already have. And so the treaties they already have, that's like for example, like Mount Rushmore. Like when Trump had he had like his rally at Mount Rushmore. That's under treaty. That's actually Native land, and even the Mount Rushmore is on Native land and it's on a sacred site. So, I mean, they already owe it to Natives for carving 2 freaking ugly heads or a bunch of ugly heads inside the mountain. So, but the natives have under treaty that land is theirs and they have control of that land. But honestly, the government just needs to first honor all those treaties that they have with native people. And so for here, I guess in the local region, for myself, it's kind of interesting. So I grew up on the reservation about 30 minutes outside the city. And there's also one reservation that's in the city, but at the time when they first created it, they're like, oh, it's out of the city right now. But they didn't think maybe Reno will get bigger one day. And so now it's actually right in the middle of the city. But we have another one outside of us, it's Pyramid Lake. And then we have Lake Tahoe too. Lake Tahoe was actually Washoe people's land. Like that was like our main sacred site. And of course, we don't have land up there because that's the profitable land that they have up there. That's where they have like the $5 million, $10 million houses up there by the lake, and they have resorts and stuff like that. But I think honestly, giving that back to the natives would be important, just because they took that, they didn't give anything to the natives for it. I think they bought it for $5 million, the entire lake, and now you can get a house for that much up there.
Well, yeah,
and so
that's the thing too.
the
Is
history
like
of plunder. Yeah.
Well, each tribe has these treaties, man, right? So, like, the treaty that we cut with the U.S. government was, like, for, like, millions of acres in New York, right? But, like, we fought for the United States. Like, we were legitimate allies of the United States. Like, when the British came, like, we fought on the side of the United States, and we still got screwed out of our land. So, like, for them to abide by that treaty would be amazing. But I don't think, they can give this cat scales to us, but then they don't. But it'd be something to get reformation. So, like anything, man. Just I'm pressing for like free education as well. So, like, give the natives like free education in the United States after putting us on this shitty land that nobody fucking wants, that can't grow nothing on. Like, they put us on this land to die, and like we can't do nothing with it. Like the land that we had, the only reason why our land is good the way it is right now. It's because Green Bay blew up into like this like small city that right going on right now. But like it was a shitty swampland, man. Like our land, like all our houses were sinking into the goddamn ground. It was bad. Like there was nothing you could really grow here at the time. But yeah, it was just, oh my god, I'm frustrated with it.
I feel like we're at a point in history, in American history now, where many people from many walks of life, from many backgrounds, feel like they have been chosen by the government to die.
Yeah.
Kind of why we're here, I think.
Right, and it just amazed me that like we just get like a measly $1,200 for like 7 months. Did any of the native tribes see any stimulus checks?
I know Josh is different, but like I think it depends on the size of the people. But so far, we've been getting. I got a couple Visa gift cards for groceries, and then I got what else? I think that's about it.
This is gonna be crazy, right? If I told you what, okay, this is absolutely unfair, right? Like I was looking at this, I talked to a couple other tribal members too, tribal people too, and I probably shouldn't fucking talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it. It's because our tribe is a pretty strong economic machine. Like we play the game a little bit, right? Like we got an outrageous stimulus check from like the U.S. government to keep the infrastructure and everything up and running. It was probably like 3 or 4 times bigger than Avery's, even per person. So like, if Avery, how much did you get? Let's just say.
Wow.
Like all together,
maybe 1,500.
1,500. 1,500. Yeah. Okay. Well, I've gotten triple that. So, it was outrageous. Like it's just because we were fucking making more money. So the more like in a whatever, it is what it is. Okay. But just because we have more money and a bigger economy, like the U.S. government is still shitting on us, and we're fucking natives, right? So like, if Avery's tribe was making a shitload of money and economy and whatnot, he would have got triple the amount. But it's still a fucking class system, man. Even if you're a fucking native, it's still a goddamn class system. I don't know.
Exactly. It's like they didn't honor Avery's tribe as much as your tribe because his tribe wasn't this economic juggernaut, whereas like yours kind of like was turning into one, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because in Nevada, like I know like there's like a stereotype that we all have casinos, we all get like all this money every month, but I don't get nothing. I don't get shit. But if it wasn't COVID, I wouldn't get anything.
Right.
But we don't have because we live in Nevada, so the casinos are already here. So it's not we don't have casinos. We have some like I think a Walmart is on our land where we get like 0.001% of their whatever they make.
Yeah.
What
Not
else?
even
Bullshit, by the way.
0.01, like 0.001.
Yeah, like 0.001. Like we don't get any of what they make at that Walmart. But
Terrible.
yeah, besides that, like our tribes out here are really like there's nothing compared to like what some on the East Coast. Like there's maybe like people always think that it's like we get like these $10,000 checks and stuff like that, but honestly, there's probably only like 5 to 8 tribes in the country who are super rich and who are the ones who really do get that money.
Right.
But if you look at the whole United States, we have like almost 600 tribes, and that's federally recognized. That doesn't even count for tribes that aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all
it's,
of
it's,
their tribes
it's
are
difficult. It's different. Like the one thing that I want to like press why I brought Avery on this is that tribes are very different, man. Like governments are very different how they run things. Like, you know, his government, what he's doing, awesome job. I love those guys, but like it's just a different machine, man. Like you have some of these tribes that are running like multi-international corporations, right? Like you have like who's that? The Seminoles, man. They own the Hard Rock, man. They own the Hard Rock Cafe across the globe, casinos everywhere. Those guys are crazy baller rich, right? But then you have like the tribes, right? My tribe, we're like, you know what? We're not getting fat checks, but we're gonna build infrastructure, right? And then we got Avery's tribe is like, dude, they're just whatever, man. They're just trying to get through the fucking year to year.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's we're not all the same, man. We don't all get free education. We don't all like receive a stipend check. Like we're not all the same fucking people. And I wish people would get that in their heads a little bit.
That's kind of what I was
I get it.
Like with the when I was saying like we don't know necessarily. We don't refer to you by your individual nations. We kind of refer to you collectively, and that's sort of a misnomer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Oh, you're good. You're good. I forgot what I was gonna say.
Oh no, that was it.
Well, it's like $1,500 went to like India, but like and then like American citizens just got $1,200. So it's like we're even getting less than like tribes and stuff, but it's like I guess like in the eyes of like the system of like the corporate class and the people who are like tied to them, it's like we're all equally worthless, whether it's like India or you're native or you're not. It's like and that's why I think that's why I like the fact that like we can see eye to eye, and like there's no need for any like hostility or animosity, because it's like these guys are all screwing us no matter what. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the sad thing about it. But it's like I don't know, but I think like under a Yang presidency, I think like he seems decent enough that he wouldn't be doing all this shady crap. But of course he'd probably have his hands tied by the people who are like already up there once he became president. But yeah. Do you think if Bernie became president, it would be a little bit better, or like?
Probably no way.
I think it's the same. Well, I mean,
no way.
Like all presidents
better
are
than
bad.
what? Yeah,
because they all have to serve. They all have to put their hand on the Bible or whatever. They all have to. They basically say they have to hold the Constitution, which is inherently racist. And it doesn't even mention Native people besides being merciless Indians in the in the Declaration of Independence. But like it's not meant to serve it's not meant to serve the real people of this country, which is like the working class, Native people. And I think so. Like, no matter what, if I was to become president today, no matter what I did, I would still have to uphold this country's stuff. So that's why I just in my opinion, we should just get rid of all of this stuff.
That raises a great question. I think if you were president, or if your movement succeeded, right? Just say, let's do a thought experiment. You would have to, deal with the issue of governing, and like, how would you deal with all the people that like now now, like, you have to govern, like, all the descendants of European immigrants like me. I think, I'm 90 minutes north of Manhattan. So I'm a third generation American, I think. I don't think about it too much. So, what would you do with me? What would happen to me? Just in theory.
I mean, like, we would treat you like we treat our people, like, because we're, like,
That
we
sounds
said,
good.
like, we're a
Sign me up.
collective.
And
So,
that's already way better than I'm getting. Way better
Well,
Well,
than
he
being
said
treated.
maybe it's better that like he gets treated like your people than he is being treated
Like,
right now.
being
with the current
treated as
government.
part of a collective would be a big upgrade in my quality of life. So that sounds great. Sign me up.
We do things for the people. We don't
Yeah.
do things to make any other person better than the other. So,
Yeah.
like, we do it just to live. We do it to the lands and the environment. But yeah, we don't. I would not be like this crazy person that's in every other country, having bases in every other country. I wouldn't even like being a leader myself. Like,
Yeah.
I would make like multiple like leaders.
It doesn't make sense to spend all this money like on the military when people over here are already like dire poverty. I mean, like it's fine. Like I talked to Josh, and he was just amazed that like how much loneliness there is amongst Americans because of this individual attitude. So many Americans are like suicidal or unhappy or depressed because they're just trapped in their jobs, and they're not even like a part of nature. Everything's just like concrete and buildings and stuff, and like boring office cubicles, and like that happy. Yeah.
See, that's the one thing that I felt like we got very lucky with Avery, right?
Right.
Like, we have a true, like, okay, not saying that no one else has this, but like it's a true push forward, man, right? Like, we're pushing for our entire community, man. Like, we have like that identity like engraved in us since we were kids, man. So we have a sense of belonging in who we are, and like if we need help, we could just go to one of the elders, man, right? And that's the benefit we get from like not really being a part of the American individualism system. So it's this whole. I mean, it's great. It's a great feeling to be a part of that, and I don't know. It's not as lonely, I think, as a lot of Americans
for
are.
sure. I mean, for me, like when you said like my dream and my vision, it's like this, like traveling in the air on a ship, like in the clouds, like that, like that, like I always look forward to like the world of the future with like the space traveling and like flying cars and like curing all sorts of like diseases, and like how can we like trains and stuff and things that, and then I'm like, what the hell is this? Like there's like a virus everywhere, and like everyone is like people can hardly afford to pay their bills, and like jobs are getting harder to come by. So I'm like, I'm really not that impressed with what's happening at the top levels. Like I'm just like, it's pretty pathetic.
Yeah, I remember. I always tell people this. Like, I remember like growing up, I was like, man, it was almost like how like in the '80s, like how they thought we would have like flying cars and like all kinds of stuff by like 2015. But like when I picture a future society, like with the way we're headed right now, I picture like Mad Max, like a wasteland. Like people are just like living off of the destruction that was caused by like greed and capitalism.
Bullshit, you know.
And if it was a society, it would be like, I want to say it would be like, oh, flying cars, like total green energy, like all this stuff, like totally renewable. But like right now, I'm thinking it's just more going to be like Mad Max with the way we're going with all this stuff.
Yeah, or like have you guys ever seen the movie Elysium? Basically, like Earth turns into this like filthy hot cesspit of like despair and stuff, and then all the rich people are just living in a space colony.
Well, dude, I've seen this movie, and it's a really bad movie. It's called Babylon AD. If anybody's ever seen it, with yeah, so like it has America as like the only first world country in the entire world,
Mhm.
and like they have like killer drones protecting the borders and stuff like that. It's all commercialized. It's like super high tech, but like the rest of the world is just a third world like slums. And I'm like, man, that's
Yeah.
totally what's gonna happen right there. So that's how I perceive it.
I kind of go back
Yeah,
and forth
it's pretty much sucks.
on how durable America is as a project right now. I mean, and I'm not saying that from a place of attachment because I have a lot of serious criticisms about this country, but I don't know. Like sometimes I think like neoliberalism is about to collapse, and sometimes I'm like, oh, it's actually super durable, and everything else is probably going to collapse before it. But I don't know.
It's kind of like a thing, but like I say like if we had like a President Yang like 40 years ago or 50 years ago, we'd be closer to like that Star Trek stuff. But like somebody told me like that would have been a death sentence for him because the powers that be, because look at what they did to MLK when he talked about a guaranteed minimum income and stuff. But I mean I don't know how long this shit can last because like it's like we've already lost like 250,000 people, like a quarter. Basically, do you know like we had like 10 September 11th in a row just from this virus. So it's kind of surreal when you think about it, but this wasn't like a terrorist attack, and this wasn't some kind of like foreign country coming here and doing stuff. This was just the incompetence that was baked into the system, creating all of this death. This was just like greed and selfishness and mismanagement in and of itself, like hurting so many people on a mass scale. Yet you had like 70 million people go for Trump because they just saw that the system didn't care. But the system didn't care, and I think didn't care either. So you're going to end up with the same thing. It's pretty sad, but I think that like like if we create inroads between like Native American ideas and just like the rest of the country, maybe there's like hope, or because like we're starting to figure out that like we don't hate each other. It's actually the people on the top that are making all of our lives miserable, and they're trying to get us to like not like each other. I think that's really what's happening.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is like we just have to get rid of this whole individualistic idea. And it's funny because I just went to a boarding school. We have a boarding school right near this area, and I went to their museum, and it has like a quote from like one of the generals that was at the boarding school that said that they had to remove the collective ideal out of the Indian and make him into the Indian American, which is the individual, which is like individualistic ideals. And I thought that was crazy because like people it's almost like with the like genocide and colonialism, like people think this stuff was done by accident, but it's literally on purpose. They want to make these people this certain way. They want to make them individualistic. They want to erase these people. I think that's what people really need to get in their head is that there's not really any answer with the continuance of this government. There's not really any answer with any more brown or black presidents. I mean, as long as they're upholding the Constitution that we have, it's not really going to help anybody until we all sort of rise up and make the government. I guess, like I really believe in like a revolution or something like that. So I think we
You
really
would
just
just
need
you would just straight up want to like make a new constitution, just straight up. Just like the constitution needs to be burned and just make a brand new one. Is that what we're talking about?
yeah, pretty much, yeah.
I'm thinking
Yeah,
like I think
let's
it's
do
best to have a renaissance because
Awesome.
revolutions are pretty bright. I just think that like I don't know. I look at the age of like our senators and our congressmen, and they're all like 60 plus. Like what the hell? Like we're like the 30. I do have faith in like the generations that are coming up because I think that a lot of the bad ideas
See, I don't.
like old people tend to
I,
on.
I see. I see. There's a new version of the same thing with younger generations. I think you're still seeing, if anything, like a further progression of the hyper individualism and the commodification of identity, and people are getting more. In the absence of any kind of communal force. I think the younger generations, if anything, might be more individualistic. Now, I think the other side of that, though, is they're also immiserated economically. So it could be that that force eventually overcomes the culture war aspects. But I think there's a big headwind.
But I think like it's so pathetic because like you have so many people that are pretending to be happy on the outside, but they're really miserable on the inside. But they're all kind of like, you know, projecting this fake bullshit. But I think it's time that we say, you know what, how about if we stop pretending? How if we just admit that the system is shit and that we just need to get rid of it? I mean, like, it's like let's have like a UBI for like our basic needs, and then like instead of one person owning all of the robots, we'll just do like a UBI except with robots. It's like the person who created the first robot, I don't think intended for the robots to like destroy us. And the people who created AI, I don't think the people who created AI intended to have all of it in the hands of a rich old white person. I don't think that was their intent. So it's like this AI and this technology and all this like stuff, it belongs to us as like a collective, not to just some asshole who's just using it to exploit us.
Well, I think Keynes, he thought we would have a much shorter work week even by now. But that's not what happened. We essentially just used the productivity gains to extract even more value out of workers. And unfortunately, I think that can go on as long as we allow it to.
Right. I just think we need to get like a couple of eggheads on our side. Like, you know, like some really, really big techies, some like eggheads who have like a conscience and who want to see their children do better in the future. That's like Andrew Yang. It's like a funny term for like a nerd. Like I think because I think like nerds are going to inherit the earth now, and it's brain over brawn. So we just need to like get the nerds to see of like a really good vision. And I think that was like Yang. He was like he was kind of like a nerd, but like the beautiful thing about Yang was like he was like a nerd with like a heart, with like a conscience, with like good ideas. And we just need more of them to kind of like and tell them like get away from these assholes who are just like, you know, profiteering and just want to destroy the world and just want to eat up the resources. Instead, let's get all the mad scientists on like our side instead of their side. Like it's kind of like my idea. If we can convince them, you know.
The talkers too. Like I know, like a lot of the people who are on the right or even like on the left who just maintain the neoliberal government, they are just good talkers. So like they know what to say, and especially like that's like the Charlie Kirks of the society. Like the I'm trying to think of other people, but those people who can just talk, they literally spew stuff out their mouth that is just total nonsense. But because it sounds good, a lot of people just they're attracted to it. I think.
Right.
I think that's. No, you're good. You can go.
We just need to work on our rhetoric skills. I mean, I know, like, I've been a Toastmaster and like very like analytical in the way I talk, and it does make a difference because like when I was taking communication studies in university, they said why this is so important is because like all of Germany thought they were enlightened, like they were intelligent, they were civilized, and they were like good people. But then a guy like Hitler comes along who knows how to like make art with like his words and get them all riled up, and like a nation of people who think they're enlightened and they think they're artists and like Renaissance people, they become a nation of like monsters committing all sorts of like atrocities and murders and stuff like that. And what led to that? It was a guy using his words to like fool them into thinking, you know, a certain thing. So we just got to get better with that, you know, and like, have people listening to us, you know.
I think too, though, that there's an aspect of I kind of push back against the great man theory a little bit in the sense that I think there are plenty of moments at which you could have had Hitler, that Hitler would have been nobody. He would have just been an artist or a painter or, you know, a mediocre painter who, you know, did good landscapes. But he really the right set of things had to come about to make Hitler, to make a Hitler. You know, same thing with like a Genghis Khan or, a George Washington.
But can the same also be said about like a Martin Luther
Sure,
King
sure,
and a
absolutely. I mean,
Yang and all that
there,
stuff? know?
Yang could have been a lawyer. I mean that could have it could have played out that way.
Right, he could have just stopped there.
And it's all a matter of I think. And this is frustrating. I'm sure because I don't really have a good answer, but I think sometimes we're always looking for kind of one neat trick, and I don't think
There is no. It takes all of us.
Izzy, by the way, I noticed you popped on.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Welcome.
This is a lot of fascinating things you guys have touched on, though.
Wait, did you just call me?
No, I just said you're here, and I said hi.
Oh, yeah.
But like, what do you think is the first step we need to take? Like, what is the first thing that we can, as individuals?
Joshua's getting us an audience.
I mean, getting an audience is a good start, I guess.
yeah. No, that is it, because like we're gonna need more people to like come in here and like talk with us. I mean, we had Congressman Ryan, we had Rokana, but the next thing that kind of does it is like how did Joe Rogan get to like his status? And Joe Rogan has a lot of money coming in, a shit ton of money, but it's like this is step one, is to just get the person on the street to be thinking about these things and bringing it up. Now, Donald Trump came in with like a lot of name recognition. So now like Yang is kind of like building that. But then but if Josh has the experience of like consulting and getting people like these platforms and these audiences and stuff, and then we just need to like combine these things collectively so we have like a good enough following. I mean, we got a lot of prominent people to like come on here and talk, and we didn't even like ask them to mirror, but maybe back then we weren't big enough. But I think it like we have to stop these thoughts in our head that like we're not worthy, or like we're just these little people over here that like don't deserve this or that. That's how we were kind of programmed to think, and that's working against us.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, it's tough, like trying to figure out where to start. Like me, like I work with youth right now, and I teach them all the stuff I learned. I think that's really the best spot, is just to like work with our youth that we have, and just sort of get rid of this individualistic identity and make it more collective. Because once you make it more collective, you start helping other things, like without even knowing it. Like you start helping the land because you're worried about helping like another person across the country like that's being affected by climate change. So you worry about the land, you worry about other cultures, ethnicities, Black people, indigenous people, people from Asia, Latinx people. Like you just start slowly learning and caring about more people. I think that's how I learned, because honestly, like when I left high school, I went to like a super like right-wing high school. So of course I left like, oh yeah, I'm such a moderate and stuff like that. I used to like talk about that. But back in high school, I didn't know anything. Like I didn't know like life. And so once I finally left and I really experienced the real world, that's where I really started becoming more collective. It was like once I really started meeting and having discussions with like Black people, LGBT, and sort of learning that we all are different, but we all have sort of the same shared experiences in a way.
Right. So
really
super right wing.
What was that?
Your mom and dad?
No, not my mom and dad. The high school I went to.
Oh, get sent there.
You're breaking up, Ariel. I don't know if you're touching the mic or something.
Oh, okay. I said, why did you get sent to a really right-wing high school, or was that the only high school in town?
Yeah, that's the only high school we could go to. It's basically it's really interesting. So it's in Sparks, which is just outside of Reno, but it's Spanish Springs High School, and it's weird because we have both. So it has the reservation, and it has another place called Sun Valley, which is more low income and people of color. So you have that mixed with totally like upper middle class, like rich, like $1 million home side of town. And so it's all kind of together, but that other side really just they sort of empower over like anybody else inside the school. But yeah, I was just like I thought like them, like I listened to them. The teachers talk the same, so I left school like thinking I was like such a moderate and like leaning like conservative or whatever. But I didn't know nothing. It's just I didn't experience anything.
Yeah.
His
that
experience is
makes
a lot different
sense.
than mine. Like, with that we grew up, we have like our own. Well, I think I showed you guys that. Like, we have our own elementary school immersion program and all that. So we didn't have to deal with that like right wing viewpoint. Sorry about that, Avery, and that experience, but this is very different. Like, it's very different. Like, it's again, I'm going to preach on the idea that tribes are very different in general altogether. So
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, in the good world, I wish we had our own tribal schools that we can go to because you're actually around our people.
well, it
But
should
that's like
be.
kind of
You
like
guys
right.
should have your own fucking tribal schools, right? Like, you don't like you know
Yeah.
how hard it is to like fit into like you're the only native in like a white school. Like, I grew up. I went to elementary school. This is before the tribe was wealthier. So before we had our turtle school, I actually went to like the white school, and I was like the only native there, and it felt so weird, so awkward. It was like the educational, like the way that we learn is just so different. Like, it's it just feels odd. Like, for me, it was so odd that I wasn't like learning from my elders or like for the family members. It was just you're sitting in front of a classroom, like staring at a like chalkboard, and I'm like, there's no like conversation. There's no like the
Yeah.
education just doesn't fit like our style. Well, at least my style of learning.
I
Very
just think it's
industrial.
like inhumane just from the get-go, no matter who you are, because like human beings are like meant to like explore and like find things out and like test things out, but we have a whole stupid schooling system that just makes us sit and shut up and like stay in one place. And you have like a whole generation of young people diagnosed with like ADD and ADHD. You know what they call that in the past? They just call that childhood. And I just think like the whole schooling system itself was just created around making obedient workers. It's like it's not nurturing your creativity or your curiosity or your like passion for like an idea. It's just like sit down, shut up, and like eventually when you get out of here, you're gonna work in one of these factories or something like that, and then the factories all shut down. It's just bad, just
Yeah, and
for
that's the whole
everybody.
thing. Like, Avery, yes, I would love for our RSIC or Washoe to have their own school system. But like, even like when we do have our own school system, like we have our own school system here, but we still have to abide by state rules in some aspects. So like, we don't even have our own educational system completely built yet. So it's you're still under this colonized like system of like this American education system, and it's still there even though it's not there. If that makes any sense.
And the ones who homeschool have to abide by the state's rules.
No, I mean our elementary
I
school
think
system. It ain't a homeschool system. We have our own elementary school system.
Yeah, but I'm saying that if people want to homeschool, they have to do the same. So it's state rules, no matter what you do.
Yeah, pretty much. But why should we have to abide by state rules, right? Like, why can we? I mean,
Right,
we're a
yeah.
sovereign nation. We should have our own educational system, right?
Like
Own credentials.
it's not any of their business anyway. It's like, are you guys like going out and like committing any crimes or hurting anyone? No. Then they can leave you alone. Like right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there was this quote. I'm trying to find it real quick, but and basically I've been reading about like this like indigenous people in the school system, and this is quote by her name is oh shoot, I can't remember her name, but otherwise she said, while the mantra of stay in school is drilled into our children's heads, we are compelling them to stay within a colonial system that continues to ignore indigenous history, values, knowledge, language, and intellectual traditions while promoting linguistic genocide as another generation of indigenous children grow up without their languages. So on top of all of what I just said, like when it comes to languages too, like we're taught English. And I always tell Native people, because I'm a mentor with Native youth, so I tell them Like if you can't speak well or you can't write well, like in English language, like don't worry about it, because honestly, it's not our language to begin with. It was never meant to be our language. Even our own languages were never meant to be written out in English. And so when it comes to talking and speaking, I tell them this, and I think they're so they feel so forced to have to fit into the system and have to speak a certain way, dress a certain way, and it's a culture that is foreign to them. It's not meant for them. I think that's why the education system is so bad for Native peoples, because we're really forced into something that our body is rejecting in a way.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna tap on the educational system, right? Like how, like my research, right? What I do, I tap into a lot of governmental stuff. But even then, like when I was going to go to New Zealand, I had no professor at my university able to sponsor my work. No one wanted to touch it. Like I'm in an educational system to learn how to do this research and like these projects and whatnot, and no professor was willing to like sponsor my work at all because they didn't know what the hell they couldn't comprehend what we were trying to do, and I didn't understand it. Like for me, it didn't really make any sense. But then someone sat down with me and they're like, "It's totally political." They're like, they don't want to touch your work because like what you're talking about is like building within the United States framework. Like you're building your own nation within the United States, and you are challenging different like political like entities. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense though. But like, how can I be part of a system like this educational system that doesn't want to teach me, that still treats me as like an enemy of the United States when I'm just trying to rebuild my own fucking nation? Like energy systems, like language revitalization, economic diversity. Like let's like these are all things that are pretty basic in like the traditional Western like viewpoints, but like a professor didn't want to touch it because it was based on Native American values, and that bothered me quite a bit because I traveled 2,000 fucking miles to study this stuff, and the only person that I could like reach out to was a student advisor. Sandra was the only one willing to have these conversations with me. Other than that, like there was nobody at that university that would even come close to touching my work.
You've seen, I think that's gotten worse since like the 60s and 70s, because you've seen a lot of Marxist professors get pushed out of the curriculum too. And I think in general, there's a push away from like any kind of politics that could be considered revolutionary or anti-capitalist in some way.
Mm-hmm. I think I lucked out because I think I had a professor. I had one Marxist professor. I had another professor, but it was actually really interesting. It was one of the best classes I took in college, but it was called Politics and Film, but he taught it through a science fiction perspective. And so we watched V for Vendetta, we watched Mad Max, we watched a couple of like the Black Mirror episodes. But honestly, just learning politics through like a science fiction perspective really expanded my mind a lot more, because I think we're so used to learning like by the book, like by like all these terms and stuff. But once you actually see it like in person, like through film or like through like a creative mode of learning, I think it's way easier to learn that way.
And narratives in general are really powerful. I mean, you see that in a lot of different places, from Hollywood to Christianity with the Bible, and particularly the New Testament, and as I understand it, a lot of indigenous cultures too. So I don't know why we moved away from that with education, but
yeah. Well, I think it just has to do with like the education system is the colonized system, and I think the more learning we did learn, I think that's why, like you see with Trump today, like he wanted to establish, if he was to be re-elected, he was going to establish this sort of like American patriot education where they don't really learn the true history of the country. And that's one thing that he like, I mean, he gets mad at kids for what they say about him just because they learn true history of the country and what the country has actually done. I think that's also why this whole college for all option is really needed, is because like some of the stuff I've learned in college is stuff that I never would have. We didn't even come close to this stuff in high school. And so just going beyond the whole high school basic a surface level education. I think is really important for our people. And I think this kind of goes with what Josh was saying, but when it comes to like accessibility, like when people don't want to learn from Native people is because they're uncomfortable with it. It's blatantly rejecting their views. And I think that's one thing that we have to get used to is being uncomfortable. Like you have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations where you have to realize like, okay, maybe this isn't the right thing to be doing right now. And I think for me, it kind of reminds me of when I first started protesting the national anthem. And it was actually before Kaepernick. But I think we're taught from kindergartens that we have to stand and say these words, put our hands over our heart. And I think when I started sitting down for the national anthem, I was like, it literally like feels uncomfortable. But that's because you're taught your whole life, like from the beginning. And this is the same for everything. You're taught your whole life. These things are engraved in you. And you have to do things a certain way. You have to really appreciate the country. And you have to put your hand over your heart during the national anthem. You have to stand for military members. You have to praise and honor the government. But when you don't, it is uncomfortable because you're rejecting that view that's been engraved within you your whole life. I think that's really important thing that we have to do is just reject these ideologies that have been engraved in us.
Right, but it's also like hypocritical too, because the only time we're a collective is for like this frivolous nonsense, or if it's to be patriotic, then we're a collective. It's like if it's to do like all these things, like no, we all have to come together as Americans. But it's like, okay, that guy is poor and he's about to lose his house. Oh, it's individualism now. But like you have to put your hand over your heart for that. So it's only collectivism when it's like, you know, the country and thing. But then when people are like actually suffering and they need help, then it's individualism. It's like
I don't understand like how America lost its way. Like right. Like America lost its way a long time ago, and I don't know if it's just the commercialization of like everything. Of
not even a good nationalism that we have. We don't even have a good nationalism. It's just it's literally like, oh yeah, we have this vague framework for we rah the military or whatever. But then when you're like, hey, can you look out for me or something? It's like, no, I'll get the fuck out of here.
But it's a joke. It's a joke. Yeah. I mean, if you
the thing is in the 90s, like the thing is, I remember and it wasn't even that long ago, and maybe I'm fucking this old or whatever, right? But I remember like back in the day, like when I say back in the day, I mean like the early 90s, right? I remember as a kid, like having like community like get-togethers and community cookouts, and like there was like a neighborhood watch. There were these things were there. Like what happened within the like last like 20, 15, 20 years? What the hell happened? Like why? What is up with this? Like it's just gone. Like American, like this whole like watching out for your neighbor or having community get-togethers or whatnot. It's just like completely gone. What happened?
Well, they slowly chip away at you. Like when I was really young, I'm just old enough to like be from that like Stranger Things generation where kids would just go out and fuck around and just talk to people, and we'd be menaces, but we'd like sort of interact with everyone. And then I want to say sometime in my teenage, like the pedophile panic hit. And then all of a sudden it was just like, oh no, like kids don't talk to anyone, stranger danger.
Yeah, I remember like, I remember like having like football games and like rolling down the road with like 10, 15 people, dude. And we'd just be like a crew, right? And like just getting together and like going to people's houses and like just, people would be like, okay, they'd invite me over for like fucking dinner if I was over on the other side of town, whatever. I was with my friends and whatnot. And like it was very more community oriented, and I'm like, what? I mean, being Oneida, this is when I was like in the like white neighborhoods, right? But like it's the same way here. Right. I mean, it's still there, it's still this way now. But like in the other, when I was living in the other side, I guess whatever you want to say, it felt like it just kind of disappeared. It's like gone.
Yeah, it's paranoia. Sad.
There's a lot of paranoia that's like actively cultivated by the media, and I really saw it hit like just like warp speed this past election cycle, and like I don't know, I'm so like black-pilled on the media.
It's pretty sad.
It's incredible.
Do you think that like the internet had like a huge thing of like creating like more individualistic and commercialized people, or people who just like consumers?
Sort of. I think it's an extension of something that's already happening. Like I think it's acceleration maybe. Though I do think even before really the internet took off, things were headed in that direction. I think it's it's a social technology pretty much. It's a way of creating good consumers and bad neighbors.
Right, right. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But
That
what's
kind of
interesting
sucks.
is this group that we have now is like a way of connecting these people who've been kind of detached, right? And now we're doing Zoom calls because we're
Right.
so detached, right? And I think like we divided ourselves and we're like, shit, this isn't working. What are we gonna do now? I miss you guys. It's a pandemic, right? And so I think people are going out of their way to learn technology in order to actually connect with people, right?
What's the difference between
And like
technically connecting with them and
well,
actually
I
being
mean
there though?
that's where like human-centered capitalism comes in, because like we don't work for the economy and the robots. The economy and the robots work for us. Like why did we forget this? It's like somebody creates, like you create something to help you, and then you become the slave of that thing that you created, and you're like, hang on a second, but like I created like what the hell? It's like it's like some like do you own your computer, or does your computer own you? Like, do you own your phone, or does your phone own you? It's like, you know what I mean? It's kind of sad. And it's like, no. Like I like these things like should be there to bring like joy into our lives, or at least improve our quality of lives, not to get us all stressed out and worried and like depressed and shit. It's just yeah.
But that's going to be on the individual, right? Like each person has to set their own boundaries with themselves and their technology use and all this other stuff. Like you don't have to let your computer take over your life or your phone
Oh
or
yeah,
your
of course.
social media platforms. But in this day and age, it's fucking hard to get away from that, right?
But the sad thing is like we've built our economy in such a way, because like I'd go into like stores or shops to like get a job, and they're like, "Did you go online?" It's like, I'm in front of your face right now. I don't want to go online. It's like I want a thing, and then they say, "Oh, kids these days, they're too in front of their computers." Well, that's because like you keep telling people to go online to like apply and like do this and do that. Like, can't win.
But
Could you
if you're
imagine?
computer illiterate, you're kind of left behind in
Yeah.
you're in a whole different
Yeah.
ball game if you don't know technology.
What you say, Avery?
Oh, this kind of has me thinking too. Like, imagine like a society where we did, like, we were just at home. Everyone worked from home, but we had like imposters or like robots that worked for us in real society. So like they go for the store for us. They just do like, I guess, like hands-on work. Like we have like robots that work for us. That'd be crazy.
Well, the thing is,
Yeah,
okay,
no,
so let's get
that
back.
would-
I'm gonna get back to the native. I'm gonna swing this back to the native side, right? So the thing is, like all these tribes that are like rural, right? All these tribes that are like way out there in the middle of nowhere. Like, so you're saying that like there's another situation, right? So they don't have a strong internet connection, don't have an internet connection or access to technology. So they're still leaving us behind in that aspect as well. So like, and I know there's a couple tribes out west. We talked about it out there, Avery, where they don't even have fucking clean water, man. Like clean drinking water. Like they have to roll like this huge truck in there, and like they all got to go off of the water truck to go get clean drinking water. And I'm like, so Faye, going back to technology, right? So these tribes don't have access to the technology, so they're getting left behind in the job market, right? They're not going to be prepared with an education. Like there's no jobs around. Like you're kind of like fucked if you're like from a rural tribe with no kind of technology or whatever internet access you can.
That does bring up a point that actually does concern me, because like there are some areas that are pretty rural that I think need technology,
and I mean,
and I don't even know how to help
even
them
if you're not indigenous, you're still fucked.
Well,
like,
but like
the thing is this, right? And I understand what you're coming from, right? But like the government has purposely not put the infrastructure in there for these people to succeed. Like this is the U.S. government, right? Like so,
it's like they rigged the game.
They rigged the game. It's completely rigged, and I'm like, why? Like you put us on this fucking land, right? You put us on this land 100 years ago. You have no infrastructure for us. You have no hope, and like all you're doing is like feeding us, feeding us garbage food, like no technology, no education. And I'm like, these kids that like grow up and like this is so the reason why I push so hard in Nevada and why I love fucking Nevada tribes, right? I love those guys. Those guys are amazing. It's like I was at like a youth convention, right? We're just trying to rally the kids for like college and stuff like that, right? Trying to rally them all up. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, first off, I was privileged just to be there, right? I'm be honest with you. And I'm like, I seen some kids on there and I'm like, man, like they're just so happy just to get like a meal, or like some of them had like holes in their shirts and whatnot, and like they're like just so happy to have us there. And I'm like, that's such a great feeling. But I'm like, man, we could do so much more for these fucking kids. Like I love Nevada, man. These tribes out there, and I'm like, man, like if we could just like push again. I'm a big advocate for free education in Nevada for Native kids, and I'm like, that's just a little thing we could do. The U.S. could do for reparations, just a little fucking thing, and that's not even asking a lot. Like our university has like 30 or 40 students. Like that's nothing, man. Like that ain't shit. Like, and they struggle just to do that. And oh man,
that's pathetic.
We're gonna be pushing this, man. Again, free native education in Nevada. Let's go.
Right.
I feel like they
really pissing me off.
They kind of build like a self
enough resources. Go ahead, Moto.
I was gonna say that they also kind of like do like a kind of psyop on the rest of the United States by kind of portraying natives as like technologically backwards, as opposed to like, oh, they don't want this technology. Their old ways is, they're still some 18th century or even like 15th century ideal. And I think the idea is like, no, they're as contemporary. You're as contemporary as we are, but these kind of narratives that it's kind of like a backhanded compliment, being like, oh, you're perfect the way you are, but it's actually a way to kind of keep you.
We're too cheap to provide you with the technology anyway, so but it's like you don't want it, but you really, like, that's not true. Yeah.
How do we get more cell towers to these areas is more my concern. How do we get Wi-Fi to these people who need this access to information, who cannot afford, education through a system that's too expensive? Like, I mean, you could do a lot of self-education, right, if you have internet. But if you're detached
what amazes me, it's like we go like nation building in like Iraq. And then I didn't know that like all this shit was so bad here. It's like, no, like this is before 2020. This is like in 2003 or 2000. Like I didn't know. It's like so you're telling me like, oh, we give so much money to like other countries that are suffering, and we go to like Peace Corps and all this stuff, and like just like right here with these Native American tribes, things this bad. Like, okay, stop being hypocrites.
That's all empire building.
I almost think the U.S. government still kind of considers us. Well, first off, they consider us wards of the state, right? They still consider us that, but also I think there's this like subconscious mentality. Maybe I'm wrong, Avery, but it's almost like we're still kind of enemies of the U.S., which doesn't make sense for me. Still doesn't fucking make sense for me because we never fucking fought the U.S., so I don't fucking get it with my standpoint.
You have to think
we were allies actually, but it wasn't too long ago, and this is one of the classes I took out there in UNR, Avery. It was like 1960s or 70s, right? I want to say maybe I'm wrong about that time. It wasn't too recent that they actually were fighting with you. Wasn't that the Washos, dude? Was it the Washos who were fighting the fucking U.S. government in the hills or some shit?
War out here, yeah, we had like multiple like wars and battles against the government, but I think you have to think about it like this. Like when it comes to the Native person, like what are we always painted as? And like I think that you look in the media, like we mentioned earlier, like the film, like the cowboy versus the Indian, we're always the person that's against or in the way of like progressiveness, or like we're in the way of just the country moving forward. That's how we're always painted. And I think that reflects into like our books too, like our education system. So we have like a chapter on natives. Like myself, like I knew more about East Coast tribes than I did my own tribe, just because that's all that's put inside the education book. And I think that's what really just makes the natives looked down upon. And also, if you think about history, like think about the people who were ever against the United States, and think about how much we're told to hate those other people. And so that natives are included in that. Even though we're told like, oh, appreciate the natives and stuff like that in this country, like we're taught inherently from books and media that the natives are an enemy to the people. And it was even in the Constitution, like we were the merciless Indians, like in the Constitution. And so from the jump, we were the enemies to this country. I think that's why we're still treated as such.
Which doesn't make any fucking sense, right? And this comes from my tribe personally, right? Because the first fucking allies of the United States were Native Americans. Like, it doesn't make any fucking logical sense. Like if it wasn't for us, George Washington would have been fucking dead multiple times. So I don't get why they labeled us as so. I mean, I do get it. They want our fucking land, right? That's what it was, right? They want us wiped out on our land. But I'm like, dude, we helped you. Like we helped the United States. We thought you guys were oppressed by the British. Like we saw our values and what you guys were trying to do, and like it aligned, and we allied with you, and we fought with you as brothers. And I don't understand why they turn their back. Well, again, I do understand, but I'm like, you fucking turn your back on your allies.
Honestly, I think the way we can fix these things, though, is getting, I hate to say it, but companies like Disney to really show the ethnic pride, if you will, of each of these different cultures. Because we have to start young. We have to make them, presented as what they are. Fucking humans who have feelings, who are just wanting to be treated.
And I mean, like you guys are like
very corporate context. Like Disney is not looking to.
Well, that was an example. I'm just saying, like in the movies, we absolutely must portray cultures. I think because like the what is it, Black Panther, I think it was the first time that all the cast was African American, and it was one of the most empowering things to African Americans that I actually met, and I was like, whoa, yeah, you're right, that is.
But also there's also some narratives within that though, where you have the CIA as the ally. You have like a distinctly non-revolutionary bent taken at the end, where Killmonger is his kind of revolutionary stance is portrayed as the villainous one, and then you have essentially at the end a sort of neoliberal arrangement pop up with Wakanda, like having these like little educational centers within the inner city. Like of course, like Wakanda can like totally go
Killmonger was the greatest hero in that movie.
I'm just trying to say that like we do pull our narratives pretty strongly from the movies that we watch, right? We definitely have a lot of impact. I mean, you can have a movie traumatize somebody into adulthood and be afraid of clowns, okay? So if you could do something like that, imagine the power we have if we were trying to represent Native Americans and their tribes. I mean, like I remember I took a class in college. I took a class in college about Native Americans, and I had to write a freaking long ass paper on it, right? But I had learned so much about these different tribes that never once had been in just the normal everyday conversations. And it kind of blows my mind how little representation there is, especially with how many natives exist amongst us.
There's actually a push for that. Actually, what's happening is kind of interesting. Within the U.S., a couple tribes are actually making embassies within Washington D.C. So, like, they're actually starting to act like real governments. So it's going to be interesting to see, like, what is going to happen within the near future, because you're seeing the rise of nation building. You're seeing the rise of tribes in the United States, and they're going to start acting like nations within the United States. And that is going to cause a lot of political fighting within the U.S.
I can't.
So there has to be a shift.
Like, consider us on your side, because the way the things are going in this freaking country and how stupid and incompetent our leadership is, we like how if you get some American citizens coming to tribes as like refugees? It's like, it's like, my country's treating me like crap. I'm gonna come and like,
Yeah, I actually thought about that. I actually thought about that. So, like, I actually had a scenario, right? So here's a scenario,
Right.
Ariel, right?
Right, yeah.
Right. What would have happened? Okay, let's say Detroit, right? Detroit and Michigan, right? Flint
Right.
with the water thing, right?
Right.
Like, what happens if the richer Native Americans were like, "Fuck it, man, let's pool our money together and send foreign aid to the United States to fix the fucking clean water system in Flint, Michigan." like what would that that would blow the mind out of fucking everybody. Like, oh, these Native American tribes are sending foreign aid to the United States to fix the goddamn water pipes.
They probably would accept it, but only if it were in the form of like a corporately structured aid. Like,
I would love to see that happen.
Yeah, right?
I mean, that actually sounds appealing to me because one, it's like, hey, look, we did it better, guys. Also, look at our example. Also,
Yeah, that's the whole thing. The thing is like, oh, we're doing it better than you guys. All right, let's go.
Yeah, dude. I mean, like, embarrass.
Americans have quite the ego, don't they?
Right, yeah. That would be great.
Can you imagine the media? Like, it's like, oh, Native tribe sends foreign aid to Flint, Michigan. That'd be cool.
I mean, if we want to do this, like, I mean, I'm down for trying to help coordinate it.
Like the other way around, where you guys have to civilize the Americans.
You're pretty much almost there, aren't you?
So bad.
Aren't you pretty much like halfway there with Green Bay at this point? Like,
right.
So,
dude, if you looked at like our tribe, man, like, yeah, we want. I think we probably own like a sixth of the city of Green Bay. Maybe not that much. Maybe like an eighth, maybe. But still, we're owning it. We want it back, man. We want it all back. So, yeah, we're gonna buy it back. No matter what, doesn't matter what it is. We're gonna buy it back if we have to.
I think we need to wrap up. We are getting at that time that we normally quit. So I wanted to give Avery a chance. Is there any social media platforms you would like people to reach out to you at, or like contact you, or anything that you would like to promote?
So I have my Twitter, which is at AVORYW. And I also have my Instagram at AVORYW2. Actually, my Twitter is Avory Wyatt, so AVORYWYATT. And then my Instagram is AVORYW. But that's really my sites where I really just push like a lot of native stuff. Also like memes. So if you like memes. But yeah, that's really, I have my Facebook page. I have the Indigenous Resistance of the Great Basin. That's one other group that I participate with. And that is a group that really just started with natives here. And we were just like, we need like a collective of natives that it was really missing out here. So we created our own group that we had. And so that's the Indigenous Resistance of the Great Basin. And also for you all here today, just look up native stuff to follow on Instagram. I post a lot of stuff on Instagram from all these accounts who post cool, knowledgeable like facts and histories of native people. So just like follow more people, and yeah, hopefully we just all of this. I don't know. We'll see what the future looks like.
It's wonderful that you are involved and sharing what you know and your experiences. Thank you for coming on, by the way. We really appreciate it. Ariel, do you want to go next? You're muted, Ariel.
Yeah, you can find me on Ariels on Twitter, so it's ARIELS, AERIALS. And I'm Revolutionary Thinking on YouTube.
All right. Moto, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Moto, and I'm on Twitter at MotoMotes. That's MOTO_MOTES.
And Joshua.
What did you say? My name?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, Mr. Oneida at Josh Eastlick at Twitter. So I do that, and I run the co-run the Yanggang Roundtable Facebook. So check us out on there, like us, subscribe, Do all that good stuff. Share us all. We need as much as we can. We need to build a bigger platform for all this.
Awesome. I'm gonna go and then I'll have Shale take it out. My Twitter / TikTok / Twitch is all under Tisdoney, TISDONEY. I like if there's any projects that you feel like you want to work towards a hopeful future. I know how to plug you into work, so just come find me, message me, and let's make the world a better place, guys. Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, thank you. Craig. Yeah.
Let's go, baby. Let's go.
I'm just like if one of your native tribes were like in crisis and dealing with like a really bad thing, I'm sure that one of your leaders wouldn't just go golfing and not do anything about it.
No. No, we're not gonna go.
Yeah.